Fellow Rosarians, today we are meeting with somebody who really does not need an introduction. And often, if you just hear the name Paul, like I watched this video by Paul or I read Paul's book, you know who I'm talking about. But for those of you who are new, Paul Zimmerman has a YouTube page, Everyday Rose Show. Paul is also a published author. He has a book that we spotlighted in our giving series, Everyday Roses. There's a Facebook page. Paul is a consultant to Jackson & Perkins, as well as the Biltmore, and Paul has a consulting company. So Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here. I appreciate the flattering introduction.
Well, there's so much to say about you. And in fact, we did a spotlight on you during our giving series. And I asked everybody in the series to check out your consultant page and find something new that they didn't know about you. And everyone had such a good time. And your resume is so impressive. And I think what people really found so fun about you was your experience of going to school, aeronautical engineering.
University of Texas to study aerospace engineering. That was my initial foray into higher education.
And how fun to decide, this isn't for me. I'm going to go to clown school.
Yeah, I did. I was about 2 years in and I thought to myself, I'm not sure I want to do this. I'm in college and I'm basically just wasting money. So why not take a break and do something else? I was 19. I was 20 years old at the time. I thought, if it doesn't work, I can always go back. So yeah. I ended up at the Del Arte School of Mime and Comedy in Northern California with an absolutely mad Italian man, Carlos Mazzoni Clemente, who was just brilliant and a genius and had a blast. And then just sort of had a showbiz career take off from that.
Well, that's fun. And so many people commented that they could really see that in your personality now, and they enjoy watching your videos.
Well, that's kind of what got the video thing started. I started doing mine in like 2007, 2008 when I had my nursery Ashdown Roses. And YouTube was in its infancy. And I looked at it and I saw a pruning video that someone had done. And they basically set a camera up, they pointed at themselves, and they pruned a rose for 8 minutes, never looked at the camera, never addressed the audience, never said, "Hi, folks," like you just did. "Hello, fellow Rosarians." And I thought to myself, holy moly, I've got a background in television production, a background in stand-up comedy, a background in writing. I think I could do better than that. And that's sort of what birthed the YouTube channel way back in the day.
I do want to spotlight, you did a video recently on a rosette disease, a Go Fund Me. And I really appreciate you doing that. And I have pushed that through to my folks so that it'll bring awareness to them, and hopefully they'll be able to give what they can to help with that. So I know that you have spotlighted rosette disease a few times now.
I started with rosette disease because there's so much misinformation out there. And a lot of gardeners are scared. They say, "I don't want to grow roses. What about this rosette disease?" And a lot of the stuff you read about is really silly. And as I always say, I've lost more roses to winter freezes than I have to rosette disease. So I got together with Dr. Kevin Ong, Dr. Mark Windham, and Dr. David Byrne, and we did an almost 1 hour show. And we just said it's a fact-based discussion on rosette disease. And that's basically what it is. And it's a GoFundMe for their research. They didn't get the grant this year, so they desperately need money. And if they don't get the money and the research is gone, we've lost 12 years of progress. And they've just had breakthroughs where they are now identifying cultivars of roses that are actually resistant to rosette disease. So we're right on the cusp of something big. So, shameless hustling, please look at the video, go to the GoFundMe page. 100% of it goes to the guys. I get nothing out of this thing. I did it as something that I felt was a good thing to do. And Mark's a friend of mine, so that was the other reason I did it. But it was a fun conversation to have.
I liked his conversation because he's so quiet, and then he'll say something that is so hysterical, like, all those concoctions and brews that Rosarians are using in their gardens. And he just made me laugh so much. So I love when you do collaborations with him.
Yeah, he's great. I like Mark. He's a character. He's just a lot of fun. He's the same in person when you see him. He's Mark. That's who he is. He's a lot of fun.
So let's circle back real quick. I did a gift giving series and I highlighted 2 things that are Paul Zimmerman related. Before I get into those, I think it's important to share with everybody what your favorite gift has been, something unique, because people are looking to surprise a Rosarian, and sometimes they might be thinking, what if they'll like this? What if they already have it? And so what gift idea do you have for us?
I've got a real simple gift idea, and it's actually not very expensive. It's plant tie. And you may think, well, plant tie, why is that? Because this is a little bit different. Most plant tie comes in pre-cut lengths. Mm-hmm. And if you work with climbing roses, a lot of times, getting them tight to the wall or the trellis can be difficult. So you want some length. This is actually a roll. which is what I love about this thing. And basically it just pops out the top like that. As long as you want to make it, there's a handy little cutting tool right here, and you basically just snap it in place and it comes off. So it's just a little simple roll. And this is just I got this from Amazon. Let me get it right side up. I'm sure there's other brands, but that's what I love about this. It's just a roll of plant tie, very easy to carry, and you can get the exact length plant tie that you want. It's a very, very simple gift.
I spotlighted in the video your book. So thank you so much for giving 2 books to our winners. I have been begging for this book and nagging my husband to death. And so he eventually, he ordered it. And so this came the other day, and now it's driving me crazy because your name's on it and I have a pretty good idea what it is. And it's going to bug me for the next month. I really want to have something to open on Christmas Day to be excited about. So I'm very excited about that, so that I can share that with everybody.
Well, enjoy.
Yes, I absolutely will. And let's say if somebody has a little bit of extra money to surprise somebody special, a great idea would be your consulting company. Did you want to talk a little bit about that? They can get a 1-hour consult for $250. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the consulting is exactly what you're talking about. It's a minimum of 1 hour. It's $250 an hour. It can be 2, 3, 4 hours. It can be a long-term project, whatever we want it to be. And it's a way, with digital media, with Zoom and FaceTime and everything like that, you can literally do virtual consulting in this day and age. I mean, I can also do in person, but that obviously becomes a lot more expensive. So it's a way to just say, my roses aren't doing well. I've got some issues going on. Maybe I need a little help placing my roses, the new roses, what they're going to do. How do I train this climber? How do I prune this? And so that's what this consulting business is. And basically, as long as you can, give me a visual, set up a phone, we have a conversation, that's what we can do. So that's what the consulting is. It's just a very simple way to consult and maybe get a little extra help if you feel you need it, basically.
I think it's excellent. And what I really love about it in this virtual environment is I can have you consult from across the United States and just share pictures with you. And so I think it's an excellent idea.
It's a very simple way to just get a little extra help. And that's what I'm basically here to do. And I'm also here to empower people. I'm not here to, I want to tell you what to do, but I'm also going to explain why we're doing it, because that's just as important, that you understand what you're doing, because then you can begin to apply it to other parts of your garden.
And I really enjoy seeing the pictures. I get so many ideas when you post a picture and say, this is a project that I worked on, and I start looking at it, I'm like, oh, I really love, all these colors that are here melting together in this garden. So I love that you're posting pictures of those also. And you're posting those through your Facebook page, right? That's where I normally see those. Yeah,
you'll see most of the photos that you're talking about. Actually, they generally accompany inspirational garden quotes. And most of them are gardens that I visited. We did a lot of them when I'm on my garden tour. The UK is where a lot of those came from. My Facebook group page, which is Paul Zimmerman Roses Gardening, which is a discussion group on Facebook that I head up, and I've got some help from 4 other admins. And that's where I post a lot of those.
Your Facebook group is so fun because I think you've got 12,000 members.
Almost 13,000 now. I checked this morning.
It's lovely. Yeah. There's so much communication and thought-provoking questions going on. So it's a great page to be on.
One thing that I want to emphasize with my page is that it's a safe place for beginners. Because a lot of times new growers or new gardeners, in fact, will go to a group, they'll ask a question, someone say, well, that's a stupid question. Why are you asking that question?
Yeah.
Or we've answered that question 5,000 times.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no. If we have to answer, what's the difference between new growth and rose rosette disease 150 times, we're going to answer it 150 times with respect, because that's just the way you do it. Why try to discourage someone who wants to come to a hobby that you and I love?
I agree. And I'm so glad that you have such a welcoming environment. And I'll share with everybody, recently, I'm trying to learn compost. And I was so shocked. I went to a Reddit page, and it makes you nervous. You feel very vulnerable when you ask a question that everybody else on the page knows. And so I asked a question, and the moderator removed it and didn't say anything to me. And I wrote to him, I said, what happened? I really want to know this question. And it was, can compost be too warm? And, what is the difference? What is mushroom compost versus cow manure? And they removed it. And when I contacted them, they said, this question has been asked 1,000 times, that you can easily do it by a Google search. And it caught me so off guard, because I think as gardeners, we want to encourage people, and we're giving, and we want people to share in our love of something. And I thought, how weird. I don't know if I've ever seen this before. So I left and said, this is not for me.
I've had people come to my group and they're intimidated to ask a question, and they'll ask it. And typically I can tell if someone's new, and I generally jump on those threads very quickly. Yeah. And the thing that we need to remember is that, maybe it's been asked 1,000 times before, but maybe that person, like in your case, just joined.
Yes.
So they don't know the history of that group. And so that's the thing. That's why you answer those questions. And if you have to answer them over and over again, you answer them over and over again. Yeah.
You mentioned something. Let's circle back. You mentioned on your consulting page, if people were pinging around, if sky is the limit for gift giving, that's an awesome idea, because how amazing to see these gardens in full bloom in Europe that we only hear about. So tell us just a quick bit about the tour.
So you can find all the information is on my website. That's sort of the central hub of where to get into stuff like that. But yeah, so it started in 2019. I did my first one. I've been asked for years to lead tours of like England gardens and rose gardens, Sissinghurst, Montesfont, things like that. And I never really found a fit that, I didn't want to do all the booking of the hotels myself. And I finally found a company through a friend of mine, Michael Marriott, Boxwood Tours, now Arena Travel, and they do all the logistics, hotels, buses. We have a private motor coach. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got bathroom on board. I mean, we stay in country hotels. We do not stay in modern hotels. I want this to be quintessential England. And we do a lot of tours of, private gardens and public gardens. And when we do the private gardens, it's a lot of fun because quite often we have lunch with the person who actually designed the garden, which is a really fascinating experience if you've never done that. And we also we go to David Austin Roses as well. We get some behind the scenes stuff there. We go to Sissinghurst. It opens at 11. We get in at 9:30 by ourselves. So we have a private tour with the head gardener at Sissinghurst for an hour and a half. A lot of teaching moments. I try to do that quite a bit. One of my big takeaways with these tours is I want folks to say, okay, I'm going to take 2 or 3 things that I've learned. And even though this is a massive scale at Sissinghurst, these are things that I can take home to my garden. Maybe it's how to peg a rose or how to self-peg or train a climber. So yeah, we're doing UK again in 2022. We took 2 years off for obvious reasons. And then in 2023, we're doing UK again, and we're adding France, gardens in central France. And then I'm going to tease this because it's now finally coming out official. So I'm going to announce it on your video here. In November of 2023, Michael Marriott, my friend from David Austin Roses, we're now retired, and I are leading a joint tour of New Zealand and Australia.
Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Here I am counting my pennies to try to figure out if I can afford to go on your next trip. And now I'm going to have to tell my husband that we have to start saving again, because that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, you can do Australia by itself or New Zealand by itself. You can do both of them combined. And it's Michael and I are leading the tour together. Limits 25 people, so you get a lot of one-on-one with Michael and I. This is, again, something he and I have talked about. But when he retired from David Austin, he and I were finally able to pull this off. Working with a great company out of Australia, Botanica Tours. They've got lots of experience. We've got some special surprises, some special guests coming. Just going to be a lot of fun. I mean, we spent literally 6 months picking the gardens and putting it all together. We're actually going to tour the Alistair Clark garden, which is the largest collection of Alistair Clark roses in the world. So just some really neat stuff that we honed in on. It's a real rose, pardon my pun, rose geek kind of tour.
I'm telling you, I'm geeking out right now. Here I am thinking that the roses alone, just buying plants, are going to make me broke. Now it's going to be going on these wonderful trips.
The European tours are all about 8 days by the time we've done. And it includes, it includes hotels, it includes meals, it includes coach, it includes basically, that we pick you up when you arrive at the airport in Heathrow or Gatwick in London, and you're delivered back to the airport. You don't have to worry about anything in between that entire time. And you can always tack on a trip in London or whatever you choose to do on your own. But no, it's all inclusive. They run about 8 days because I feel some of them were shorter, but I thought, if folks are going to fly all the way across the ocean, let's make sure they get a really nice tour. No more than 2 gardens a day, by the way. We keep it very, very leisurely. And I always try to make sure that in every single garden, folks have at least an hour and sometimes an hour and a half to wander on their own after we've had sort of a guided experience. So you can just, go back to take some pictures. What was your favorite vista? Take notes, whatever it is you choose to do. So I keep the pace relaxed is what I try to do with these tours. And we have some fun. We have some great meals together too.
What appeals to me about it is it's basically an all-inclusive experience. If you want to do more, you can. But I'm kind of a nervous Nelly about traveling. And I like that if I wanted somebody to totally take control, the whole thing is taken care of. From where are you going to eat? How are you going to get to point A to point B? I love this.
We generally get a private dining room in the hotel for dinner so we can eat by ourselves and, have conversation and talk. And so, yeah, it is literally literally from the moment you get off your airplane to the moment you get back on your airplane, it's all completely sorted.
So let's talk about another, if sky's the limit. I have shared with people that they could have a rose named for them. And I see that on your consulting page. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so basically I work in that collaboration with the breeder Ping Lim, who's done some amazing roses. You're sent photographs of 3 or 4 different roses to choose from. It includes some plants as well that come with it, the ability to order more plants if you want to gift them to friends and family and stuff like that. And the cost is right around $10,000. So, you know, slightly more than plant type, but not too bad.
When I win the lottery, there's going to be a rose one. Maybe it'll be named Kimberley, or maybe it'll be named Rose Geek. I'm still thinking about that.
Rose Geek would actually be a neat name for a rose.
Yeah. I'm sure that you are asked often with your consulting company, how do we choose a rose for a location? Can you tell us a little bit about the process you go through to choose a rose?
So here's the first thing you do. You want to do your research in terms of locally. You know, what zone do you live in? That's obviously going to be important. You know, what region of the country, even though, you know, so I'm in zone 7 in the southeast, well, zone 7 in the Midwest or the West may be different because of humidity and that kind of stuff. So do some local research is the best thing to do. And again, this is where discussion groups are actually terrific. You know, you'll see a lot. I know you've seen it, Kimberly, on my Facebook group. Someone says, you know, I need a white climber. I live in the Pacific Northwest. Well, all the Pacific Northwest gardeners jump in with recommendations. The most important thing to picking a rose for any garden is what's the rose's job in the garden. And I know that sounds a little weird, but we're used to sort of, you know, hybrid teas and floribundas being all the same size. But when you really start to dive into the rose world, you've got growth habits from ground covers like drift roses, for example, or things like that, you know, to climbers and randolls that go 30 feet up a tree, and every size of shrub in between. Anyone who's ever grown, you know, a David Austin rose, for example, knows they can become very large shrubs. So, and a rose hates being cut back all the time to be something it doesn't want to be. So knowing the mature size of what you're going to do with it. So, for example, is the rose a frontal border of a traditional border? That's going to be lower. If it's middle border, it's going to be higher. If it's back of border, it's going to be taller. If it's a low hedge on a walkway, that's going to be lower as well. Maybe it's a high hedge for privacy. So know what you want the rose to do. What's its job in the garden? Then go find the appropriate rose and the appropriate color that's actually going to fit that. So that's the biggest thing I tell people. What do you want the rose to be? Find the right size and the right rose to fit that job that you want the rose to have.
If I said to you, what is your favorite rose? It's hard to choose, I think, but
that's very hard to choose. Yeah, it's the one I probably just smelled. That's probably my favorite one at the moment. But so roses are broken into classes. You know, floribunda, hybrid tea, et cetera, et cetera. I live in the southeast, upstate of South Carolina, the western part of the state. The old-fashioned tea roses do very well for me. They're not hardy past zone 7, so you know they probably wouldn't not do as well for you. But if you look into breeders, you can almost look at it like musicians or artists or authors. You know, you probably have a favorite author. And once you've read 2 or 3 books by that author, you sit there and say, okay, well, they have a new book coming out. I'm going to buy it. You know, I like their book. You can find the same with roses. So, for example, there's a really good German breeder named Cordes, and they've been breeding roses for well over 100 years. Wilhelm Cordes, the late Wilhelm Cordes, stopped spraying his test fields probably close to 40 years ago. So they've got all those genetics into them as well. And the way you find this out is not in the name, but you've also done something like, you've seen a rose, you know, that's called, you know, Bob Smith or something like that. But then underneath there's this weird code. It could be like Core Magic, KOR Magic, or KOR White or something like that. Those initials, 3 to 4 initials, that's the breeder code when they register the rose. So Cordes is KOR. Right. So anytime you see a breeder code that starts with KOR, that's a Cordes rose, regardless of what the name is. So those are really good roses. A breeder that I've worked with a lot, who's new to America, who's just not new to roses, but new to America. They've been around for almost 80 years now. Is Delbar. DEL is the code. I actually represented him in America for quite a while, and I got him in with certified roses, who has taken him to a whole new level. So Arnaud and I are still good friends. I've had a lot of his roses for close to 20 years in my no spray garden, sustainable garden here. Unbelievable roses. And every single one of them has amazing fragrance. So look for Delbar. You're starting to see them more and more in stores now. The Painter series, which are all stripes and stuff named after Impressionist painters, you know, those are really good roses to go with as well. You know, star roses and plants. Steve Hutton, when he owned it, same thing. They stopped spraying their fields ahead. They handle a lot of the roses. In fact, all the roses by William Radler. Will did knockout. So there's those genetics. So you begin to get a feel for where you can get some of these roses. But most new roses, David Austin, Jackson Perkins, Weeks, Bailey, that are being released in America now are quite healthy and quite disease resistant, because we now have 20 years of genetics since Knockout came out. You, the gardeners, have told the industry, we want disease resistant roses that are not difficult to grow. So that's sort of a long-winded way of saying, what's your favorite rose? A lot of it I base on breeders, quite honestly, in collection.
Well, the Cortez in my garden is the healthiest.
Yeah.
It laughs at black spot, and I don't have to spray, I don't have to treat, I don't have to defoliate. So anytime I see a Cortez, I take a harder look and say, will it work in my yard? I'm new to Delbard. I love David Austin for the fragrance and the look of it, but sometimes they're a little finicky. I'm still willing to put in the work for them, but I love them. So it is very hard to pick a favorite. It's like saying, what is your favorite child? You can't. You love them all for different reasons.
It is. It's very, very difficult. And some of the older David Austins are a bit finicky, but they also stopped spraying their test fields about 8-9 years ago. So the newer ones are, and here's the thing that folks need to keep in mind. So somebody crosses 2 roses to get a new seedling. Okay. And that happens, that's the beginning of a new variety being introduced. Then it goes through trialing and testing and evaluation, and then it's building the numbers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the time to get from here, the new seedling, to when the rose is actually available to the customers out there is about a 10-year window. So that's the thing. So the roses that are coming on the market, like the 2022 introductions, were actually probably hybridized in 2012. So that's something to keep in mind. So when I say Austin stopped spraying their test fields 8, 9, 10 years ago, keep in mind that that's the time it takes to get there. But
another rose breeder that I'm really interested in is Halbert. And so I'm seeing Halbert roses out of Canada, and I guess that's Select Roses out there. Awesome, beautiful roses.
You're talking Brad Jalbert?
Yeah, is it Jalbert?
Jalbert, yeah.
So I tell you, my pronunciation is on point most of the time, and people make fun of me, but it's difficult in the environment that we're in, where it's virtual, but we don't get this opportunity to speak with other Rosarians. And I really appreciate it when somebody shares the proper pronunciation, because we're all looking at things phonetically. And one of my biggest mistakes was walking around my yard and looking at the gardens, and I saw Gentle Hermione. And I got so many comments of, what is wrong with you? And don't you watch Harry Potter?
That's Harry Potter,
the movie Harry Potter. No, I've never seen it.
It's Gentle Hermione is what it is. Yeah. I only know it because I was at Austin with Michael, and he said, that's Gentle Hermione. And I went, what?
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Well, and so now whenever I see that word, I really have to look at it for a second and say it a few times in my head. So thank you.
That's fine. Yeah, no, it's spelled Jalbert, but it's Jalbert. Yeah, he has good roses. I've got several of his in his garden, in my garden, and you'll start to see more. Again, Canada getting his roses in, it's tough to get them in, but yeah, Brad breeds very, very good roses.
So I've done a lot of unboxings, showing lots of different vendors. Are there any vendors that I haven't spotlighted that you buy your roses from, or any vendors in particular that you like that I've spotlighted?
Yeah, you spotlighted really most of them, and actually spotlighted some I didn't even know about, which is kind of cool. I don't really want to name a favorite vendor or vendors, because they're all friends. A lot of them are friends of mine, and I don't want to get in the hot water. I will only say this, that these smaller vendors, and you know who they are as well as I do, Heirloom Roses, Roses Unlimited, Antique Rose Emporium, A Reverence for Roses. Those are just some of them. That's not any priority order. That's just what's coming into my head. Those are the ones who are preserving the rare roses out there right now. I'm an independent consultant, Jackson Perkins. You mentioned that. JP, we carry, I think, about 220 varieties of roses during the year, which is a nice selection. But then you look at Heirloom, you talk to Ben Hanna at Heirloom, he carries like 800 to 900 varieties per year. Pat and Bill at Roses Unlimited, probably close over 1,000 or something along those lines. And the other thing too, and I'll make this pitch for Ben Hanna at Heirloom Roses, and I didn't even know this till I interviewed him for the Everyday Rose Show. So John and Louise Clemens, who started Heirloom Roses, built a collection of roses over the years. They brought them all in from Europe, because the rose mosaic virus fears of the roses here in the United States. And we won't go into a whole Wally thing about RMV, but bottom line is, John and Louise built an incredible collection of roses from Europe, old roses, new roses. He has the original Jude the Obscure that came to the United States is sitting in there. Ben, out of his pocket, has preserved that collection. He told me it's almost 4,500 roses that are from Europe, and many of which are not in commerce, but he keeps them because he feels that's important. And so when you buy a rose from Heirloom Roses, you're not only obviously funding the nursery, and it's a business. I mean, Ben's a bright guy, but you're also funding these people keeping these roses in commerce. The late Peter Beals, when I was visiting with him, once we were walking through his fields, and he told me, he says, look, I carry about 1,200 varieties of roses. And he says, here's the way it is. I got 600 varieties that I know are going to sell like crazy. Madame Alfred Carrère, Madame Pierre Roger, things along those lines, the modern roses. He said, then I got 600 that are not going to sell, but I'm bud maybe 10 or 15 or 20 of them or something like that, like a Rosariox Bergii or something like that. And he said, maybe I'll sell 5 and I've got to throw the other 10 away. But he said, those roses need to be there. And he said, that's what identifies Peter Beals' Roses Nursery are those roses. And those are unique and rare. So that's the kind of love that these people put into these nurseries in preserving our genetics. And that's why you really need to support, obviously, get them where you can. And there's bargains, you got to have a budget. But if you can get one from a small nursery, please do so. So that's my plea.
Yes, no, and I agree. It's really important to support these vendors that have a mission to keep older roses in circulation, because just like you said, this took 12 years or so to bring to market. All of that work, and to see it just disappear is very sad.
Yeah, it is. And not all roses should be preserved. There's some ones out there that frankly should go away. But that being said, I actually hope folks had helped me find one. So I said, just how many roses are in commerce in the United States at any given moment? So think about this. So we do get box stores and big nurseries that carry great roses, by the way, maybe 300 or 400 varieties that you can maybe, collectively pick from amongst that group. Okay, there's almost 6,000 varieties of roses in commerce in the United States at any given moment. So who's got those other 5,500?
Right.
It's the small nurseries. That's who's got them. Yeah.
So let's talk now about your consulting service. We touched on it briefly a little bit ago, but I want to dig into that now and spotlight what somebody can expect through the whole process. So first, they'll start with going to your consultant's page and signing up for that 1-hour consult. Can you move us on through that process with the amount of time involved and how they should prepare for that meeting with you?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's 2 things you can do when you go to my website. You can do the consulting, which we talked about earlier. That's like an hour, maybe just a little bit of things. There's a form you can fill out that tells me what you want to talk about. You can upload some photographs. You can email me more photographs. The more information I have ahead of time when we do the consulting, the better I'm going to be able to do, because I can also do some research on my own when I know what we want to talk about. So that's the basic consulting. If you feel you need a longer consulting project, that it says there right there, just email me, and then we can always say, okay, this is going to be maybe X number of hours, and maybe we'll work with a set price or something like that. So if you want to do a garden design, a full-blown garden design, that's a slightly different process. Don't sign up for the hour. What I want to do first and foremost is you contact me, give me some information, some photographs, some things along those lines, some ideas of what you want to do. Then we're going to have a Zoom call, and that call is free. That's the initial consultation call. I want to make sure that I'm a good fit with my potential clients before I take any money from them. Because if we come out of that Zoom call and we're like, we're not clicking, or I'm not understanding what you want, or maybe my style isn't your style, then I'm going to say, you know what, I think it's probably better if we don't work together, and we go from there. So if we then decide to work together for a garden design, there's a flat fee. That's not by the hour. That way, you know exactly what your budget's going to be. You know exactly what you're going to spend. And that's a full-blown interactive. We work together. We come up with, plant lists. I do a full-blown design, which I sent it to you in a PDF. It's on graph paper. 1 square equals 1 foot. All the plants are placed exactly where they need to be. So you can just measure them in and figure out where they're going to go. I'll also help you with care protocols. Some people would say, could you help set up a fertilizer program for me with these? Absolutely. We'll do some soil analysis, maybe send soil samples out, get some analysis back so I can take a look at your soil and see, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that, prep the garden, things along those lines. Okay. And I've even done when people say, I'm placing the plants, I'm not sure where they go. I'm fine. Pop me on FaceTime or Zoom with your phone. Let's go stand in the garden. And they'll literally have someone holding it. And I'm saying, no, little to the left, little to the left, little to the right, little to the right. And I'm available to it. You have a couple quick questions down the, a year later. I hear from clients a year later saying, hey, this is doing well, or what should I do with this? And I'll certainly answer. So that's the design process. And like I said, it's very interactive. The customer gets a lot of input into the design as well. So those are the 2 things. The consulting is just, I need a little bit of help. That's by the hour. And then there's a flat design fee. And if you're not sure, just email me before you spend your money, and we'll make sure you get what you need.
Well, I think that this is really awesome. And, if we picture all of the Rosarians and gardeners are going to be looking at their pictures and dreaming about their gardens for next spring. So they've got this downtime, December, January, February, where they can be consulting with you to help make the garden of their dreams.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do it. And this is roses and perennials too. This is just it's not just rose gardens. I mean, there are roses, perennials, shrubs, and everything along those. I've designed full landscapes as well. But yeah, that's what this is. So it's not just a rose garden. But yeah, it is.
Wait, there's something else besides roses, Paul?
It's hard to believe, but yes.
So if somebody consults with you from once they are able to schedule that initial Zoom call, what is an average to completion for, let's say, the garden plan?
So when you contact me, I try to make sure we get a Zoom within a week. I don't like things to linger. I really like to be on top of things as much as I can. And then generally the design process, you're looking at, once we get the initial Zoom call, you look about 3 weeks to get a final design. I try to turn them around fairly quickly, particularly if I know that we're in the buying season, the mail order season, and I'll even recommend mail order sources for roses. Here's the rose I'm calling out. You could buy it here.
Oh,
and
excellent.
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, because a lot of the stuff's going to be mail order. It's not stuff you can walk into a garden center or we talked about Cordes, for example. We'll use Cordes, but I know where you can mail order them in from. And I try to make sure that the roses are all coming from one, maybe no more than 2 sources to keep your shipping costs down and things along. Same with perennials. I know where you can get them from. Obviously, if you can shop from your local garden center, they probably can source most of your perennials. But some of the roses are going to be a little bit unusual. I'm going to make sure that we're picking good ones for your area.
Yeah. So I thought it would be fun if we show everybody the process that you and I are going through. I asked Paul to give me some consulting advice. I kind of had an idea what I wanted, but I need help taking it to the next level and bringing it together. And so when I reached out to Paul, I sent him this picture. I'll pop up. And this is the entranceway to our home. And I really wanted to give it some pizzazz. And my concern going into this that I shared with Paul is that I have always loved knot gardens and that very structured look. But I live in the country. Nobody else gardens here. And so I didn't want to shock people when they drive by of, hey, what's going on here? But I'm all in now, and I just need to do what I think is really going to make me happy. And so I'd like to have a knot garden at the front of the entranceway. And so I'm asking Paul for advice on how do I construct this and what are the best plants for this garden? When we think about a knot garden, should I be using evergreens, or what is your thought process about that?
Yeah, so a knot garden, in case some of the viewers aren't sure what we're talking about, it's a garden that basically is woven in patterns using generally hedging material. Boxwood is a very traditional for a knot garden. So just think of that is basically what you're doing. And then there's pockets in between the hedges where you plant plants in these pockets of hedges that are weaving in and out. So to answer your first question, yes to evergreen, absolutely. Because in the wintertime, when maybe some of the plants in between aren't there, you still want something there to look at. And a knot garden, it can be aesthetically pleasing on its own. And I think it's going to work for your entrance. I mean, you've got great, I'm looking at the photograph myself here, you've got great symmetry on both sides of your entrance there, which is very, very important. You've got the trees that you've got there. Obviously, we've got the mailbox on one side, but that's not that big a deal. Then I know you've got the hydrangea hedge towards the back, which again gives us that wonderful backdrop, and that gives us the height to go with. So, you definitely want to, rim your driveway as it comes out. And then, so there's our structure. And then we start to weave the garden in and out in between. The trees are going to play an important part into how that knots are going to form.
Okay.
Then the key becomes, what do we plant in between those knots? What goes in those spaces that we've got? And the thing that we can do with this, which obviously there's going to be some roses, I'm guessing.
Maybe.
Maybe, who knows? Who would have thought?
Everybody knows me. It's going to be roses.
Yeah.
Surprise.
But the nice thing about this is you're talking about, you're afraid of shocking your neighbors. So because we have this structured evergreen knot garden, let's say boxwood, let's just say we're going to go with boxwood structure, then we can plant plants in between that are a little bit more billowy, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more, I call it contained chaos is the word that I like to use. Or on this side of the driveway, on this side of the driveway, for example, if we plant in a specific knot over here, we go with a white low growing rose, maybe white drift or something like that. Then we need to go with a white low growing rose over here. It doesn't have to be the same one. It could be a different one, but that's going to give you the symmetry and the calmness. Because if we do all different things, then all of a sudden we get really higgledy-piggledy, and that's when it looks busy and messy. which I know you're trying to avoid because this is the entrance and you're worried about your neighbors. So they drive by and go, oh, good, I've got this beautiful structure, the boxwood. I've got these wonderful flowers that are billowing out. My eye is not being blown all over the place. There's a calmness to it. So that's basically how we get it.
So a couple of questions then. For the box hedge, if I have a hedge in my yard, I try to keep them at about 2 feet or shorter. For this entranceway, what height? Because I want to be able to see the flowers, within the boxes.
Yeah, I think 18 inches is probably a good height,
Okay.
because you also want to be able to stand and look down on it and see the pattern.
Yes.
If the hedges are at eye height, you can't, then it's like a maze. You can't see what's
Okay.
beyond. So you want to keep it down low because the pattern is part of the aesthetic of this thing. It's not just boxwood to contain a border. It's part of the pattern. And also then to your point as well, that also allows you to look down and see the plants, which is another reason why you also don't want the plants very tall. You get an 18-inch hedge, maybe your plants are 2 feet high, maybe 3 feet at most, but not a whole lot more than that. And even those would go more towards the back. And in some cases, you might have plants that are only 12 inches high and don't come above that, but that's okay, because again, you're looking down onto it.
Well, I definitely am going to want your advice on what to put in and kind of the placement of, once we figure out what the X's are, and how this boxwood is going to be laid out, what makes sense from a calming visual standpoint and symmetry, because I could certainly say, hey, I want all drift roses that are white, but I do want a little bit of variance. And so I love Nepeta, I love salvia, but actually Nepeta does so much better for us here than salvia.
Yeah, that's coming up with what I call a plant palette. You don't have both the door Nepeta, we've talked about it before. We know there's going to be some roses. What are those roses going to be? And then, and we can pop some color. There's no reason we couldn't do some soft yellows. In there, David Austin does some beautiful lower growing soft yellow roses that are more pastel yellow than hot yellow.
Yeah.
Those things complement each other. Blues are I always tell blues and roses go together so well because there are no true blue roses. Yep. And they really make the colors pop is what they do. So we want to make sure with the plant palette, what I always try to do when I do a garden, I actually keep a fairly minimal plant palette and I plant in groups, because that's what a lot of people make the mistake. They buy a plant, one of this, one of that, and they plant them and they look at it and go, this garden's kind of all over the place. What's going on here? It's by these large drifts of row. And I'm talking in some cases in a larger border, it could be, 12 square feet of a perennial. But that's what keeps the garden calm and keeps your eye calm. And also then repeating, you mentioned salvia. Salvia comes in a lot of different colors, which is great. Yeah. But the nice thing about the growth habit of salvia is it's fairly consistent, upright and spiky. So if I repeat a white salvia and then maybe a blue salvia and then maybe a soft pastel pink salvia, even though I'm using different colors, the eye is seeing the structure and the shape being repeated. And that begins, again, you get away from that really busy kind of out of control look.
As I'm thinking about inside those boxes, I was thinking, what a bang for a buck if I do a Swanee or a white Medellin. Is it Medellin? It is.
It's Medellin. It's Medellin. I've had it with Mayan. Meilland, I believe is the spelling, but Mayan is generally how I go with it. But you'll get 10 different pronunciations. About
okay. That. What I love about this rose is that it is up to 6 foot wide. And so it's low growing, maybe, I don't know if it was 2 feet, but I thought, wow, I only have to spend $20 and fill this whole box.
That's probably either white Medellin, white Mayan, or Alba Mayan.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. The white Mayan in particular is a terrific rose, beautiful bloom. And like you said, it really spreads, but doesn't get tall. And that was another breeder, by the way, that we should have mentioned, Mayan. Star Roses and Plants handles in the United States. But yeah, the white Mayan series and the Alba series, particularly the white Mayan, I use it a lot. It's an outstanding rose for exactly the reason you talk about. You get a lot of coverage out of that thing.
When I think about Mayan, he's been so kind because I have butchered his name so many times. And I finally reached out to him and I said, could you please tell me how to pronounce this? Because and he's like, I just like that you're talking about the roses.
I have the same thing when I walk the fields with our No-Del bar. It's the same situation. I'll see the name and I'll go, oh, what a beautiful rose. Da, 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 da. And Arnaud goes, what are you talking about? And I go, oh, that one. And he goes, oh, and then he'll pronounce it correctly in French. And I went, all right, I screwed that one up.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your time. And what I'd like to do is let's get back together in the spring. I'm planning on implementing your plan as soon as I can get my hands on the plants at the nursery. And I'd like to share that with everybody through the season and watch how my Zimmerman garden is looking.
No, that'd be fine. Absolutely be happy to do that.